Hello you guys, welcome to today's lesson on graphing a table of values part 2. When we left the last lesson, I didn't get a chance to recap the vocabulary words to make sure that you guys understand what each of those words mean. So we are going to start today's lesson with that vocabulary list. Okay, so let's go over each of these words, and I just want to make sure that you know what they mean and that you can apply them in the lesson. So, line. We've talked about this definition a number of times in this class. A line is straight, has no curves. A line extends forever in both directions. A line is made up of an infinite amount of points, okay? Because this line goes on forever and ever in this direction and forever and ever in this direction, that's why it's made up of an infinite amount of points. So in order to graph a line, we need, oh, you guys, this is a grammar mistake right here. This should say we need to know. So sorry, that's probably wrong on your notes as well. We need to know at least 2 points the line passes through. Every line has a specific equation, and the ordered pair for each point on the line satisfies the equation of the line. So, solution. When we talk about solution as it applies to this lesson, remember the solution for the equation of a line was a point that is on the line. Okay, so let me give you an example of that. Let's say we have the line y equals 2x plus 1. A solution for that equation would be 1, 3. Okay, so this point right here is on this line because when we plug the x in for the x in the equation, so if I plug this x in for the x in the equation and the y in for the y in the equation, it's going to make a true statement. So let me go ahead and show you how that works. So instead of this y, if I plug in 3, and then I keep the equation just like it is, but instead of the x, I plug in a 1, okay, then we are going to get 3 is equal to 2 times 1, which is 2, plus 1, which is 3. 3 does equal 3. Okay, so we know this point is on this line, and this ordered pair provides us a solution to this equation. Okay, so when you have a point that's on a line, the ordered pair for that point provides you with a solution. And if I were to graph this line, y equals 2x plus 1, I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick graph here. I know this line crosses the y-axis at 1. So remember, this is my y-axis, and this one is my x-axis. I know the slope of this line is up to the right 1. And so I can graph a line if I know 2 points that the line passes through. So this is the graph of the line y equals 2x plus 1, and we can see that the point 1, 3 is on that line. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the next one. We're going to talk about these two at the same time, dependent variable and independent variable. When we have that equation, y equals 2x plus 1, this y is dependent on whatever we choose for x. Okay, if we let the x be 1, the y is going to be 3. If we let the x be 2, okay, so if I take this equation and instead of the x, I plug in 2, the y is going to be 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. So when I let the x be 2, the y is 5. If I let the x be negative 1, the y is going to be equal to 2 times negative 1 plus 1, which is negative 2 plus 1, which is negative 1. So when the x is negative 1, the y is negative 1. Okay, so the x, that is our independent variable. That's the one that we are choosing. The y is the dependent variable because the y is dependent on whatever we pick for x. Okay, so when we talk about dependent variable and independent variable, the x is going to be the independent variable and the y is going to be the dependent variable. Okay, the y is always going to be determined or dependent on what we pick for the x. Okay, so that would mean that the x's are our inputs and the y's are our outputs. So let's go ahead and talk about the next one, table of values. A table of values is something that we use to be able to generate points on a line. Okay, so if we know the equation of the line, we can use a table of values to help us generate some points that are on that line, and then we can graph the line. And then the last one, function notation. Remember, that was a way of writing y as a function of x. So remember, if you have an equation, y equals 2x minus 1, if we want to write this using function notation, we can say that the y is actually a function of x because it's dependent on the x. Okay, so we can interchange these two. Okay, so that is our list of vocabulary. Now let's go ahead and start with graphing. Okay, you guys, so the thing that we left off with in the last lesson is I left you with doing this quiz, which is to complete this function table. Remember, a function table gives us a way to find some points that are on this line. Okay, so we can let the x be 2 in this equation and then solve for the y, and that will give us a point that's on this line. Okay, so if we let the x be 2, the y is negative 1. If we let the x be 0, the y is negative 3. And I know that you guys did this on your quiz. If we let the x be 2, the y is going to be negative 5. If we let the x be 4, the y will be negative 7. And if we let the x be 7, the y will be negative 10. So now, if we know 2 points that are on a line, we can graph that line. So we know the point negative 2, negative 1 is on this line. We know the point 0, negative 3 is on this line. We know the point 2, negative 5 is on this line. So let's go ahead and just graph these three right here, and that will graph our line for us. So negative 2, 1. From the origin to get to negative 2, 1, we're going to move to the left 2 and down 1. Okay, the x-coordinate is negative 2, the y-coordinate is negative 1. So this point right here is negative 2, negative 1. 0, negative 3. So 0, negative 3 is to the right or left 0 and then down 3. 1, 2, 3, right here. 0, negative 3. 2, negative 5. So from the origin, we move 2 to the right and then down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, negative 5. Okay? And once we have graphed at least 2 points, we can graph the line. So setting up a function table gives us a way to find some points that are on a line. Okay, so if we have the equation of a line, we can graph that line by finding at least 2 points that are on the line. So let's go ahead and practice this some more for this lesson. For each of these, we are going to graph using a table of values. So here's the equation right here, negative 2x plus y equals 1. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to rewrite this in function form. So what that means is we are going to solve for the y. So that the y will be dependent on the x. Okay, the y will be a function of x. So if I take this equation, negative 2x plus y equals 1, and I solve for the y, that means I need to isolate that variable. I need to get this y all by itself. And in order to do that, we're going to have to get rid of this term right here, this 2x term. So the way that we do that, the way that we get rid of the 2x on the left side is to add 2x. And if I add 2x to the left side, I have to add 2x to the right side, which gives us y is equal to 1 plus 2x. Now our equation is in function form. Okay, remember another way to write this is f of x equals 1 plus 2x. Okay, so our y is going to be a function of x. So let's go ahead and rewrite this in function form. So f of x is equal to 1 plus 2x. Okay, so now after we have written our equation in function form, after we've solved for the y, the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to find some points that are on this line so that we can graph the line. Okay, so if we take this equation, y equals 1 plus 2x, I'm going to clear off some space here for us. If we take this equation, y equals 1 plus 2x, and we let the x be, we can actually pick anything that we want. So let's figure out what the y is when the x is 1. Okay, so if I take this equation, y equals 1 plus 2 times 1, I'm running out of space there a little bit. Let me go ahead and bring that over here. Y equals 1 plus 2 times 1. Okay, so when I let the x be 1, the y is going to be 2 times 1, which is 2, plus 1, which is 3. So when the x is 1, the y is 3. So that gives us a point of 1, 3. Okay, we know that this point 1, 3 is on this line. And in order to graph this line, we need at least 2 points, but it's always a good idea to find at least 3 points, okay, whenever you're graphing using a table of values, because any 2 points will graph a line, but by finding the third point, you can make sure that you have done your table of values correctly. So let's go ahead and look at the next one. If we want, let's see, what should we pick for x? Let's pick a negative 1. Okay, and this space right here is a little cramped, so I'm going to go ahead and our equation here is f of x equals 1 plus 2x, or we can say the y is equal to 1 plus 2x. So if we want to figure out what the y is when the x is negative 1, we take our equation, instead of the x, we're just going to plug in negative 1, and then we're going to solve for the y. So 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. We always do the multiplication before we do the addition. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. So this is kind of getting in our way here. So when the x is negative 1, the y is also negative 1. Okay, so now we have 2 points that are on the line. Let's go ahead and find a third point. Let's clear off some space here. Let's say we let the x be 0. And when you're creating your table of values, you can actually use anything that you want for the x. You get to decide that. The x is your independent variable, okay? It can be anything that you want, and then the y is just dependent on whatever you pick for x. So this time we picked 0 for x, and when we pick 0 for x, 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. So when we pick x for 0, our y is 1. So now that we have 3 points, we're going to go ahead and graph each of these points and draw our line. Okay, so the first one, 1, 3. That means we're going to move from the origin here. We're going to move to the right 1 and up 3. 1, 2, 3. So 1, 3. Negative 1, 1 would be to the left 1 and up 1. Okay. And then we have 0. Oh, sorry, this is negative 1, negative 1. See that? That's why you have to be careful when you're graphing here. We found that point to be 0, or negative 1, negative 1, and I forgot to put the negative 1 there. Okay, so negative 1, negative 1. So to the left 1 and down 1. There we go. And then we also have a point at 0, 1. Okay, so when you're graphing using a table of values, if you don't have the 3 points line up, then you know that you've done something incorrectly. And you can see that right there, that's what happened with me. When I went to graph the 0, 1, it wasn't lining up with my other 2 points. So that's when I had to go back and look at this one and realize that I had forgotten the negative 1. So that's why it's a good idea to have 3 points when you're graphing. Okay, so we were just able to graph this line using a table of values. So let's review the steps again. We're going to do this on another one just like this. So when we graph a line using a table of values, our first step is to write it in function form. Okay, so we're going to solve for the y. And basically that just means we're going to get the y by itself, right? We're going to isolate the y. So for this equation right here, let's go ahead and do this. In order to get this y all by itself, we're going to have to get rid of this plus 1. And the way that we get rid of a plus 1 is by doing a minus 1. So now on our left side, we're left with y equal to, on our right side, we have negative 3x minus 1. So we just rewrote this. If we want to do this in function form, it would be f of x is equal to negative 3x minus 1. And you guys actually can decide how you want to think about this. If you want to think about it as y equals negative 3x minus 1, or as the y being a function of x. Okay, but either way, we're doing the same operations. Okay, so now after we have put our equation in function form, our next step is to choose some values for x, so our inputs, and then we are going to figure out our outputs, or our values for y. I always pick 0. The reason I always pick 0 is because it always eliminates one of the terms. So if we pick 0 here, let's go ahead and clear off some space. I wish I would have left you guys a little bit more room. Hopefully you have enough room on your note guide. Okay, so if we let the x be 0, the y is going to be equal to negative 3 times 0 minus 1. Negative 3 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. So when we let the x be 0, the y is negative 1. Let's pick another value for x. And it doesn't actually matter what we pick. I'm going to go ahead and pick a negative 2. I'm going to let the x be negative 2. So if we take our equation and instead of the x, we let the x be negative 2. Negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. So when the x is negative 2, the y is 5. And let's go ahead and pick a positive 2. Okay, so if I take this equation, instead of the x, I let the x be positive 2. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 minus 1 is negative 7. And you guys, as you are doing this, please, 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 I can't say this enough, please make sure you're using a calculator, okay? So the first point, 0, negative 1. The second point, negative 2, positive 5. And the third point, 2, negative 7. Okay, so remember, you get to pick the values for x, and then your y is going to be dependent on whatever you pick. So 0, 1, that is to the right or left 0 and down 1. Negative 2, 5 is to the left 2 and up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we have 2, negative 7. So from the origin to the right 2, down 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and you can see that all of these line up in a nice, pretty line here. So this is the line y equals negative 3x minus 1. Okay, let's go ahead and do this next one. Our first step, remember, is to rewrite in function form. Basically, we're going to solve for y and make this a y equals equation. So in order to solve this one for y, this one's a little bit trickier. There's two things we have to get rid of. We have to get rid of this negative 4x term. We also have to get rid of this multiplication of 2. Okay, so let's first get rid of the negative 4x by doing a positive 4x. And we need to do that on both sides. So then we have 2 times y equals 8 plus 4 times x. And then from there, we're going to get rid of the multiplication of 2 by using division. So we get y equals 4 plus 2x. Okay, so now y is a function of x. So that means whatever we plug in for the x is going to determine what our y is. So let's go ahead and pick a few values here. Let's let the x be 0. Let's let the x be 1. Let's let the x be negative 1. Okay, so if we take this equation and we let our x be 0, you guys can see that 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 4 is 4. When we let the x be 1, we take our equation and instead of the x we plug in 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. 2 plus 4 is 6. Notice we always do the multiplication before we do the addition or subtraction. And let's let our x be negative 1. So 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 4 is positive 2. Okay, so now let's go ahead and plot these points here. And if we've done this correctly, they will all line up so that we can graph our line. So 0, 4, that's to the right or left 0. So from the origin to the right or left 0 and then up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, your first number always tells you how many you're going to move to the right or left. The second number tells you how many you're going to move up or down. Okay, 1, 6 is to the right 1 and up 6. Negative 1, 2 is to the left 1 and up 2. And yay, we have a line. Okay, remember, a line extends forever and ever in both directions. Don't forget your arrows, or else that is a line segment. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, now you can see that this equation right here looks a little bit different than our other ones. It only has a y, and it is a linear equation. Remember, a linear equation can have just one variable or two variables. So y equals 2 is a linear equation. If we are going to make a table of values for this, well, it's already been solved for the y. So if we let the x be 0, what's the y going to be? Well, there's no 0 in our equation, so the y is going to be 2. If I let the x be 2, what's our y going to be? Well, again, the y is going to be 2. If I let the x be negative 2, well, the y is still going to be 2. Okay, so you guys can see that the y is always 2. It doesn't matter what we pick for the x. The y is always going to be true. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like on our graph. So 0, 2, that would be right here. 2, 2, that would be right here. And negative 2, 2, that would be right here. So if we draw the graph of our line, we can see that our line is a horizontal line crossing through only the y-axis. And whenever you have an equation that just has a y in it, that equation is always going to be a horizontal line, always. And it will cross through the y-axis only. Okay, so y equals 2, this line right here, this is the only line in our coordinate plane where the y always equals 2. So let's go ahead and look at another example here where you just have an x in your equation. So x equals negative 3. So if we let our x equal negative 3, what's our y going to equal? It'll equal 0. And this time we need to think about it a little bit differently as well. So what if we let our y equal 1? What's our x going to equal? What if we let our y equal a negative 3? What's our x going to equal? Okay, so if your equation is x equals negative 3, that means the x is always going to equal negative 3 no matter what the y is. So negative 3, 0 would be right here. Negative 3, 1 would be right here. Negative 3 is going to be right here. So when we graph our line, you guys can see that if it's an x equals equation, so if it, oh, my line got a little crooked. So if there's only an x in your equation, let's see if I can straighten this out here. I'll just have to draw it again. So if there's only an x in your equation, your line is going to be a vertical line crossing through that point. Sorry, I missed again. Crossing through that point on the x-axis. So x equals 3 is a vertical line crossing through the x-axis at negative 3. Okay? So that's a couple of special kinds of lines that you need to know how to graph. So with that said, you guys are ready to try some of these on your own. These are your 3 quiz questions. So this is question number 1. This is question number 2. And this is question number 3. So for each of these questions, I want you to solve the equation for y. Okay? And then you're going to choose some values for x. Let those inputs help you figure out what your outputs are. That'll give you some points that are on the line, and then you need to plot the points and graph your line. I'm going to help you just get started with quiz question number 1. If we are going to solve for the y here, if we're going to get this y by itself, we are going to have to get rid of the 9x. And then you guys, I hope you can see that there is a -3 in front of the y. So that's actually, the y is being multiplied by -3. So when you solve your equation, you're first going to subtract 9x, which I know that you know how to do that. But then just be very careful that you bring down that negative sign in front of the 3, because this is really -3 times by y equals 6 minus 9x. So then you have to divide everything by a -3. So y equals -2 plus 3x. Okay, then I'm going to let you guys take it from there. So for each of these quiz questions, you are going to solve for the y. You're going to choose some values of x, figure out what the y is for each of those values of x, plot the points on the coordinate plane, and then graph your line. Okay, you guys, I would have to say that this lesson is probably one of the more tricky lessons that we've had in this class. So if you are still needing some help, if this is something that you don't understand, please make sure you come to class. That's the first thing. Make sure you come into class every day because we can help you in class. And then also make sure you come to Math Lab. Math Lab is every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 3 to 5. So even if you can't be there right at 3, if you can be there at 3:30, come at 3:30. It lasts until 5 o'clock. If neither one of those times work for you, please email us, call us, text us, let us know, and we will set up another time that does work. Okay? We're here to help you. We're on your team. We want you to be able to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video. Hope you guys have a really awesome day, and I will hopefully see you soon.